The message arrived on a quiet afternoon, the kind of afternoon that usually carried peace. I was sitting near the window, folding warm laundry that still smelled like soap and sunlight, when my phone vibrated softly beside me. I smiled without thinking. Mothers never outgrow that habit. Even at my age, my heart still jumped when my son's name appeared on the screen. But the smile didn't last. "Don't interfere with us. My wife feels uncomfortable. Please respect our space." That was all it said. No greeting, no softness, no mom, just a clean, cold sentence that cut deeper than any argument ever could. I read it again slowly, hoping I had misunderstood. Maybe it was written in anger. Maybe his phone had been in her hands. Maybe there was some hidden kindness between the words, but the screen stayed silent. The meaning stayed heavy. My hands began to shake. I placed the folded towel on my lap and stared at the wall in front of me. Memories rushed in without permission. The nights I stayed awake when he had fever. The school lunches packed carefully with handwritten notes. The years I worked extra hours, saving quietly so he could attend university without worry. I remembered how he once held my hand and promised, "I'll always take care of you, Mama." Now I was being told I was interfering. What hurt most was not the boundary itself. Every family deserves space. What hurt was how suddenly I was turned into a stranger. I had only tried to help, cooking meals when they were tired, paying small bills when they struggled, offering advice when they asked, or at least when I thought they asked. I typed a reply, then erased it, typed again, deleted again. My fingers hovered over the screen, but my heart felt too tired to fight. I realized something painful in that moment. If love has to beg for permission, it is no longer love. It becomes humiliation. So I did something I had never done before. I put the phone down and chose silence. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much to argue myself into becoming smaller. That evening I cooked dinner for one. The pot felt heavier than usual. The house felt wider, emptier. I ate slowly, listening to the ticking clock, wondering when my son had learned to speak to me like a problem instead of a mother. Before sleeping, I opened my bank app. My hands paused again. For years, I had been quietly helping them. Rent, groceries, emergencies. I never told anyone. I never asked for thanks. But now, after that message, I finally understood something I had ignored. My kindness had become expected. My sacrifices had become invisible. Tears fell onto my pillow that night, but they were quiet tears. No loud crying, no dramatic pain, just the soft heartbreak of a mother realizing that love, when taken for granted, slowly turns into loneliness. And that was the night the door to my heart didn't slam shut. It closed gently with dignity, with sorrow, and with the beginning of a strength I didn't yet know I had. The morning after his message, the house felt impossibly quiet. I moved through my routine, mechanically, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, and making tea. But each sound seemed louder because it wasn't filled with laughter, voices, or even the subtle complaints of a family that feels safe together. Their absence was a presence in itself, a hollow echo of love that once was. I didn't reach out. I didn't call. I didn't send another message. Part of me wanted to explain, to plead, to remind him of the years I had poured into his life like water into soil, hoping he'd bloom with gratitude. But a sharper, quieter part of me had begun to awaken, the part that understood respect cannot be demanded, only earned, and if they could speak to me like a stranger, then perhaps it was time I treated their absence with the same calm distance. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I kept busy to avoid dwelling too deeply, but even small tasks carried weight. Folding laundry felt like sorting memories. Each shirt a reminder of milestones I had celebrated quietly. First steps, first school performances, late night studying, the day he moved into his first apartment. I had been part of all these moments, yet now I was erased with a single sentence. I thought about reaching out again. Maybe my grandson needed me. Maybe he wanted a grandmother's hug. Maybe my son would reconsider. But each imagined scenario ended the same way: rejection. The silence had already spoken more clearly than any words could. It said, "We don't need you. We don't want you." One afternoon I sat by the window with my tea, watching neighbors pass by. I realized how much of my life I had spent bending, giving, and sacrificing in the hope of keeping my family close. And yet, all that love, all those years of devotion hadn't guaranteed a place at their table. Not because I had failed them, but because I had confused closeness with entitlement. My heart ached, but slowly a subtle shift began. Pain was still there, yes, but it carried a new clarity. I began to observe without interfering. Angie. I noticed my own breathing, my own heart, my own needs. I remembered that kindness is valuable only when it doesn't destroy your sense of self. I began to see that silence could be a teacher, showing me the difference between love that heals and love that diminishes. Then one evening, my grandson's laughter floated through the hallway, carried from the neighbor's house where he had been playing. I felt a pang, a longing I could not ignore, but it was tempered by a quiet strength. I had loved too much to allow their indifference to shape my worth. In the following days, I stopped sending money. Small bills, little gifts, the occasional gesture of help. All of it ceased, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of recognition. I had to reclaim my dignity, the part of me that had been quietly eroded by expectation and entitlement, disguised as gratitude. Silence, I realized, hurt more than words. Words could be argued against, explained, forgiven. But silence revealed the truth. And the truth was clear. I could no longer give what they had stopped valuing. And in that realization, I found the first flicker of peace. It was a lonely peace, but it was mine. And for the first time in many years, I began to feel the weight of my own life, not as a shadow beneath theirs, but as something solid, enduring, and quietly unshakable. It was mid-morning when I heard the knock at the door, a sharp, impatient sound that immediately set my heart racing. I wasn't expecting anyone, and instinctively I felt the familiar swell of hope, the wish that maybe they had come to apologize, to explain, to reconnect. But the hope was fleeting. I had already learned the hard way. Hope can be heavy when it is misplaced. I opened the door cautiously. There they were, my son and his wife, standing awkwardly on my porch. His smile was tight, rehearsed, and her eyes darted nervously around the house as if judging it, as if measuring my worth. My grandson was with them, clutching his small backpack, blissfully unaware of the tension that hung like smoke between us. "Mom," my son began, his voice too casual, too practiced. We just wanted to talk." I studied him carefully. There were no apologies in his tone, no acknowledgement of the message that had wounded me so deeply. Instead, there was a subtle urgency, a hint of calculation that I had learned to recognize over the years. Their presence wasn't about reconciliation. It was about expectation. I stepped aside to let them in, my voice calm. "Come in." The house was quiet, too quiet. I watched them settle in, the small forced movements, the nervous shuffling of feet. I poured tea, placing the cups on the table with deliberate care. My hands were steady, my expression neutral. Inside, my heart was racing, but I refused to betray the strength I had been cultivating through silence and observation. After a pause, my son finally spoke. We've been struggling a bit. Bill's the apartment. Maybe we could, a little help." I nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. My tea stewed in my cup, untouched. The words felt familiar, yet they landed differently now. They were not asking. They were demanding or expecting, or perhaps both. I took a deep breath. "I see." He shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we wouldn't ask if it weren't important." I held his gaze steadily, the corners of my lips soft, the weight of years of patience behind it. "I understand, but things are different now. I've realized that love doesn't require proof in the form of money or favors. I've been giving for a long time, and I've realized that I need to protect my own peace. You'll have to manage this yourselves." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have been. They exchanged glances, quick, anxious, and then almost reluctantly gathered themselves to leave. My grandson lingered for a moment, looking up at me with innocent curiosity, and I smiled gently. "I'll see you soon, dear, but for now, it's time for you to grow on your own." They left without protest, their footsteps fading down the street. And as the door closed behind them, I felt a quiet, profound relief. Not victory, not revenge, just the deep satisfaction of standing firm in my dignity. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't begged, and I hadn't allowed resentment to define me. In that moment, I understood that the most powerful lessons are learned in silence. They had come knocking after the money stopped, not because they had changed, but because they needed something I no longer owed. And that realization, bitter, sharp, but ultimately freeing, marked the beginning of a new chapter. For the first time in years, I felt the lightness of boundaries honored, of respect, quietly enforced, and of a heart learning that strength can be gentle and still unshakable. The house was empty again, yes, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt steady. It felt mine. After they left that day, the house felt different. Not empty, not lonely, but lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled a long-held breath. I sat by the window with my tea, watching the sunlit tea filter through the curtains. And for the first time in decades, I felt fully present in my own life, not just as a mother or grandmother, but as a woman with her own quiet dignity. The first few weeks were strange. I no longer received messages asking for help, no small emergencies to solve, no subtle demands hidden behind laughter or polite conversation. There was silence, yes, but it was no longer painful. It was deliberate, a calm space I had created for myself, a space where I could breathe without apology. I began to tend to things I had neglected for years, books I had wanted to read, letters I had meant to write, and hobbies long forgotten. Gardening, knitting, and even long walks around the neighborhood became moments of rediscovery. Each day I felt the weight of expectation lift just a little more, leaving room for self-respect, patience, and reflection. Occasionally I thought about them, my son, his wife, my grandson, and a part of me ADHD. I wondered if they understood the depth of my love or the quiet sacrifices I had made, but that ache no longer demanded action or apology. Instead, it became a mirror, reflecting back the lessons I had learned, that love must never cost your peace, that boundaries are not betrayal, and that emotional strength often blooms in silence. Months passed, and with them came clarity. I watched them from a distance, not with resentment, but with calm observation. Their struggles, their small victories, their impatience, all of it revealed what I had already known. True respect and appreciation cannot be forced. They must come willingly, and if they never came, it would not diminish the years I had lived with integrity, kindness, and patience. One evening, my grandson appeared at my gate holding a small drawing he had made in school. "Look, Grandma," he said, beaming. I smiled, taking the drawing gently into my hands, feeling the warmth of connection without expectation. I hugged him softly and whispered, "It's beautiful, my love." That moment was enough. No money, no favors, no sacrifices, just the pure, unspoken bond between a grandmother and her grandchild. And in that quiet, simple interaction, I understood the final truth. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is the ultimate act of love for yourself and for those around you. When you honor your own boundaries, your own dignity, and your own heart, you create a life of quiet strength that no one can take away. That night, as I closed the curtains and settled into bed, I felt a profound peace. I had learned to love without losing myself, to give without being diminished, and to stand firm without anger. My heart was whole, my spirit calm, and my life finally fully mine. The lesson was clear, gentle, and enduring. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our loved ones is the gift of ourselves, fully present, fully respected, and fully free.